The daughter who saved the family business. My name is Emily Carter. And I'm 34 years old. The last text message my father ever sent me before everything collapsed was only 5 words. I disown you. Talk to my lawyer. I stared at the message for almost a minute. Then I typed one word. Okay. 48 hours later, my mother called me in tears. But to understand why, I need to tell you how we got there. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, in the shadow of a man who built an empire from nothing. My father, Marcus Carter, started our construction supply company in 1987 with one rusty truck and a rented garage. By the time I graduated from college, he'd turned it into one of the largest construction supply businesses in the Southwest. Everyone called him a genius. I called him Dad. And all I ever wanted was for him to be proud of me. I was the practical child. Straight A's. Honor student. Industrial engineering degree. I liked numbers, because numbers didn't lie. Systems made sense to me. If something was broken, I could fix it. My younger sister, Tiffany, was the opposite. 3 years younger. Beautiful. Charismatics. She could walk into a room and have everyone laughing within 5 minutes. Dad adored that about her. I remember one weekend when we were teenagers, Dad asked us to reorganize the garage workshop. I spent hours creating an inventory system and labeling every drawer. Tiffany moved a few boxes around, declared. The room looked more inviting. And then left to meet friends. When Dad came home, he smiled. Tiffany, sweetheart, this looks fantastic. Then he walked right past my carefully organized system without saying a word. That was my childhood in one moment. She got credit for appearances. I got silence. I learned to stop expecting praise. I built my own life instead. After college, I took a management position with a manufacturing company and specialized in operational efficiency. Companies paid me very well to solve complicated problems. I bought my own house, built my own savings, created my own future. I stayed mostly out of family business. Then Tiffany met Jason Reed. The first time I saw him, I knew exactly what kind of man he was. Perfect smile, perfect hair, perfect manners, and eyes that lingered just a little too long whenever someone mentioned money. He was 27. She was 31. They met at an upscale nightclub. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within a year, they were married. Within 2 years, Jason had somehow become one of the loudest voices in our family business. I never forgot our first dinner together. Jason barely asked me anything. Instead, he kept looking at Dad. How many employees do you have? Do you own all the delivery trucks? How many states are you operating in now? When Dad mentioned expansion plans, Jason's eyes practically glowed. I remember feeling cold. I couldn't explain why. Now I know. Predators always recognize opportunity. Over time, Jason positioned himself as the modern thinker the company needed. He talked about branding, innovation, social media, vision, words that sounded impressive but meant very little. Dad loved it. Tiffany loved it even more. I stayed away until Thanksgiving of 2019. That night, after dinner, Dad pulled me aside. He looked exhausted, older somehow. Emily, he said quietly, I need your honest opinion. How bad is the business? I looked at him carefully. What is Tiffany telling you? That everything's fine. Just a rough patch. That was my first warning sign. The construction industry in Phoenix was booming. If our company was struggling, something was seriously wrong. Dad handed me the financial statements. I opened my laptop, and within 10 minutes, I felt sick. Labor costs were up nearly 40%. Revenue had barely increased. Expenses were exploding. Then I saw the details. New luxury trucks, a warehouse they didn't need, several unnecessary employees, thousands spent on branding campaigns. Then, I saw Jason's salary, $75,000 a year. Director of Marketing and Strategic Communications. I nearly laughed. I looked at his work reports, social media posts, photo shoots, promotional videos. Nothing that generated actual business. Then I saw inventory records. They had $200,000 of materials sitting untouched. Products nobody needed. Items that had not moved in 6 months. I spent 3 more hours reviewing everything. When I finally looked up, Dad seemed afraid. "Can you help us?" I should have said no. I really should have. Instead, I looked at the man who had worked his entire life to build something meaningful, and I said yes. That decision changed everything. The betrayal. I took 3 months of unpaid leave from my job. 3 months. Most people don't understand what that means. It means waking up every day knowing you're not earning a paycheck while draining your savings to save someone else's dream. I moved back to Phoenix in December of 2019. At first, I believed I was helping my family. I had no idea I was building the stage for my own betrayal. The deeper I dug into the company, the worse it became. Tiffany had been making decisions based entirely on instinct. Jason had been making decisions based entirely on appearances. Together, they were a disaster. The warehouse lease alone was costing the company nearly $4,000 a month for space that sat completely empty. One entire corner had been turned into Jason's content studio. Ring lights, decorative signs, a fake office setup for social media photos. I remember staring at it in disbelief. People were getting laid off while this man was playing influencer. Then, I found the hiring records. 6 of Tiffany's friends had been brought into the company. None of them had relevant experience. One employee's entire job was calling customers and asking vague questions about their projects. The customers hated it. One contractor literally told me, "Please tell whoever keeps calling me to stop. I buy gravel. I don't need a weekly emotional check-in." I nearly laughed. Then I remembered this business was bleeding money. Suddenly, it wasn't funny anymore. I spent Christmas rebuilding everything. I redesigned inventory systems. I negotiated supplier discounts. I created new delivery routes. I built software that could track every product and every truck. I personally invested $150,000 into technology and infrastructure. I barely slept. Some nights, I fell asleep at my desk. Dad would come downstairs at 2 in the morning and find me working. "You should get some rest. After I finish this, you always work too hard." I wanted him to say he was proud of me. Instead, he would pat my shoulder and go back to bed. By April of 2020, the results were impossible to ignore. Delivery efficiency increased by 45%. Inventory costs dropped by 30%. Monthly profits increased by $35,000. The company was alive again. Dad started calling me his miracle worker. I hated how much that meant to me. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Then I noticed something strange. Whenever customers praised the improvements, Tiffany would smile and say, "We've all been working really hard." Jason would add, "Our new vision is finally paying off." Our, not Emily's, ours. I ignored it. I told myself they were just excited. I wanted to believe that. Then, I started noticing little things. Jason asking questions. "Who owns this software? How difficult would it be to transfer? Can someone else manage the supplier relationships?" At the time, I thought he was trying to learn. Now I know he was planning. In May, Dad called a family meeting. I remember walking into the conference room smiling. I thought we were finally going to discuss my future in the company. Maybe a partnership. Maybe an ownership stake. Maybe, for once, recognition. Instead, I found Tiffany and Jason sitting at the table with printed presentations. Jason was wearing a suit I'd never seen before. He looked excited. That should have scared me. The lights dimmed. The presentation began. The first slide read, "Strategic Organizational Realignment." I remember blinking. What? Then, Jason started speaking. "We've been discussing the future of the company. We. Not dead. We." Another slide appeared. "Leadership Structure for Sustainable Growth." I suddenly felt cold. Tiffany smiled. "Dad thinks it's time I take operational leadership." I looked at my father. He nodded. "You've got your own career." "Emily." I stared at him. Jason clicked to the next slide. A chart appeared. Tiffany, Future CEO. Jason, Executive Vice President. Emily, Strategic Advisor. I actually laughed. I thought it was a joke. No one else laughed. My stomach dropped. Then came the ownership percentages. 65% to Tiffany, 10% to Jason, 15% to me. The rest remained with Dad. I couldn't speak. I had rebuilt this company. I had saved it. And they were giving ownership to a man who spent more time taking selfies than working. Jason smiled. Think of it as promoting you. Promoting me. I had done all the work. I looked at Dad. Is this real? He avoided my eyes. You've always been independent. Independent. That word. As if my success somehow disqualified me from being valued. I slowly stood. What about my investment? Silence. What about the $150,000 I put into this company? Dad cleared his throat. We're family. I felt my heart sink. What does that mean? Family doesn't charge family for helping. The room went completely silent. I remember hearing the air conditioner running. I remember seeing dust floating through the sunlight. I remember realizing something terrible. This had all been planned. Jason's presentation. Tiffany's rehearsed smiles. Dad's excuse. They had waited until I fixed everything. Then they decided they didn't need me anymore. I looked at each of them. On a bit one. And suddenly, my entire childhood made sense. The garage. The praise. The favoritism. The excuses. I had never been the daughter Dad intended to build this company with. I was simply the daughter he expected to clean up the mess. I sat back down. Strangely. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was calm. Terribly calm. I looked at Jason. Who put this presentation together? He smiled proudly. We all contributed. Of course you did. I looked at Tiffany. You really think you can run this company? Her expression hardened. I've been here for years. No. You'd been present for years. That's different. I stood again. Congratulations. Dad looked confused. Emily. No. It's okay. I smiled. It frightened even me. You all clearly know exactly what you're doing. I picked up my purse. Jason frowned. Where are you going? Home. We haven't finished discussing compensation. I turned around. Oh. I think we have. Then I walked out. I drove for nearly an hour before stopping. I sat in my car and cried. Not because of the money, not because of the company, because I finally understood something I'd been refusing to accept for 34 years. I was never going to be enough. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I sacrificed, no matter how many times I saved them, I would always come second. I cried until I couldn't anymore. Then, I went home, and I opened my laptop, because there was one thing they didn't understand. Every system I had built belonged to me. The software, the databases, the supplier contracts, the routing technology, the inventory systems, everything. When I started the project, I had made Dad sign a consulting agreement. He hadn't read it. He trusted me. The agreement clearly stated that all intellectual property remained mine. And if my engagement ended, I could revoke access. I spent the entire weekend documenting everything, every line of code, every contract, every system, every improvement. Then I drafted formal termination notices. On Monday morning, I sent them. And then, I changed every password. Watching the empire collapse. At exactly 10:03 Monday morning, my phone rang. It was Tiffany. I let it ring twice, before answering. Hello? What did you do? She screamed. I pulled the phone away from my ear. What are you talking about? Nothing works. The inventory system is down. We can't access customer files. The suppliers are calling. What did you do? I took a sip of coffee. I terminated my consulting agreement. Silence. Then. You can't do that. I already did. Emily. People can't even log in. That's unfortunate. Her breathing became heavier. This is sabotage. No. This is contract enforcement. A man's voice suddenly came over the speaker. Jason, put me on speaker. I smiled. He was already angry. You need to restore everything right now. I don't need to do anything. You built those systems for the company. I built those systems through my consulting company. You know, we can't operate without them. I looked out my apartment window. Then perhaps you shouldn't have pushed me out. He actually sounded offended. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious. You destroy your own family's business. That question almost made me laugh. No, I wasn't destroying it. They already had. I was simply refusing to save it a second time. I hung up. 5 minutes later, Dad called. Then again, and again. I finally answered on the fourth call. Emily. His voice sounded panicked. Please restore the systems. You terminated my engagement. We didn't mean. You gave my work away. You're overreacting. I closed my eyes. Even then, even after everything, I was still overreacting. Dad. The agreement gives me 30 days to revoke access. But we don't know how any of this works. I know. A long silence. Then he whispered, please. I almost said yes. Almost. But then I remembered that conference room, the PowerPoint, the smiles, the way Jason had thanked me for my contributions before trying to erase me. No. I hung up. That afternoon, my attorney called. He had already heard from Dad. They're threatening legal action. Do they have a case? He laughed. No. I smiled for the first time all day. Everything is protected under your consulting agreement. In fact, if they keep pushing, they may end up owing you more money. Good. I slept peacefully that night. The next morning, the first customer called me, then another. By noon, I had spoken to 6 of the company's biggest clients. They all asked the same question. What happened? I kept my answer simple. There have been organizational changes. I've started my own consulting firm. The responses surprised even me. Can we work with you instead? Are you taking clients? Can you help us directly? By the end of the week? I had signed 3 major contracts. I wasn't trying to steal customers. But customers go where competence goes. Meanwhile, things inside the family business were falling apart. Without my inventory software, nobody knew what products they had. Without my routing system, trucks were driving all over Phoenix. Without supplier relationships, prices exploded. Within 1 week, they ran out of basic cement. A contractor screamed at Tiffany over the phone. You promised delivery yesterday. We're working on it. You've been working on it for 3 days. They lost the account. A few days later, I heard about another disaster. Jason had ordered $60,000 of materials they didn't need. Again, apparently, he thought they might become popular someday. Some people never learn. Then came the social media videos. I wish I were making this up. Jason decided the company needed to improve its online image. He started filming videos inside the warehouse. One featured him wearing a hard hat and talking about innovation while standing in front of products he couldn't identify. Another showed him trying to operate a forklift. He nearly hit a shelf. The video somehow made it online. Construction workers across Phoenix turned it into a joke. One version was edited with circus music. It went viral. I watched it twice. Then I laughed so hard I cried. A week later, Dad called again. Emily, I could hear exhaustion in his voice. We've lost 3 clients. I said nothing. We're trying to rebuild. I still said nothing. Finally, he whispered, I didn't realize how much you did. That one sentence hurt more than the betrayal, because it meant he had never seen me. Not really. Not until I was gone. The second month became even worse. Suppliers started demanding payment. Employees quit. Warehouse workers were laid off. Tiffany looked terrible. I ran into one of her former employees at a coffee shop. Your sister cries almost every day. I didn't know how to feel about that. Part of me felt sorry for her. Another part remembered every time she accepted praise for my work. By month 3, their revenue had dropped 30%. Operational costs had increased 60%. The business was bleeding money. Then the phone calls changed. They weren't angry anymore. They were desperate. Dad called, then Tiffany, then even Jason. The same message, every time. Please come back. Please help. Please save us. I refused. Every time. One Sunday afternoon, someone knocked on my apartment door. I opened it and froze. It was Tiffany. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Wrinkled clothes. She seemed 10 years older. For a long moment, Neither of us spoke. Finally she asked, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She sat on my couch. I waited. Eventually she said, "I don't know what I'm doing." I blinked. "What?" She looked at her hands. "I thought I did. I thought running the business would be easy." EOS. The same thing everyone thought. That because I made it look simple? It must have been simple. I don't understand any of it. She started crying. I don't know inventory. I don't understand pricing. I don't understand the systems. I stayed silent. Then she whispered, "I thought you were exaggerating." For the first time in my life, my younger sister looked small, broken, human. "I was jealous of you," she admitted. I looked up. "What?" "Dad always talked about how smart you were." I almost laughed. Smart. Maybe. Praised. Never. He always said you could fix anything. I swallowed. "Then why did you treat me like I didn't matter?" She cried harder. "Because I thought if you stayed, there'd never be room for me." The room went quiet. 34 years. And it all came down to insecurity. Then she said something I never expected. "Jason left." I looked at her. "What?" "He moved back to California." I blinked. "What about the children?" "He took them to visit his parents and never came back." I stared at her. "He says he needs time." No. He needed money. And the money was gone. I suddenly remembered all of Jason's expensive dinners. Designer clothes. An endless ambition. Rats leave sinking ships. I looked at my sister. She seemed to know exactly what I was thinking. He never loved the business. She whispered, "No." She looked up. "He never loved me either." Did he? I couldn't answer. Because she already knew. She sat there crying for nearly 20 minutes. Then she finally looked at me. "Can you save it?" I took a long breath. The truth was, yes, I could. The company was still salvageable. But only if someone competent took control immediately. I looked at my sister. Then I remembered the conference room, the PowerPoint, the betrayal. I slowly shook my head. "No." She closed her eyes. I think. In that moment, she knew everything was over. The price of favoritism. After Tiffany left my apartment, I sat alone in silence. For a long time, I stared at the wall. I expected to feel victorious. I didn't. I felt tired. Because no matter how badly my family had treated me, watching them lose, everything still hurt. The company wasn't just a business. It was my childhood, my father's dream, a place where I'd spent summers organizing inventory and helping in the warehouse, a place I once imagined inheriting together with my family. Now it was dying, and there was nothing left to save. 2 weeks later, Dad called. His voice sounded different, defeated. "Emily, I already knew. The bank is foreclosing." I closed my eyes. "We're losing everything." I said nothing. The warehouse, the trucks, all of it. I leaned back in my chair. What happened to Tiffany's leadership? Silence. What happened to Jason's vision? He let out a shaky breath. "Please don't." I wasn't trying to be cruel. I genuinely wanted him to understand. For years, he had excused incompetence because it came wrapped in charm and confidence. Now, reality had finally arrived. "I know I made mistakes," he whispered. "Mistakes, Emily?" "No. Dad. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday." I stood and walked toward the window. "You handed control of a company to people who had no idea how to run it." I thought, "I know what you thought." I looked out over Phoenix. "You thought I would always be there to fix everything." Silence. Because we both knew it was true. For 34 years, I had fixed everything. And every time, someone else got the credit. Then his voice cracked. "I didn't mean for this to happen." I finally turned back toward the room. But it did. I heard him crying. For the first time in my life, my father sounded old. I lost everything. I swallowed. So did I. "No. You didn't. You have your company." I closed my eyes. "You still don't understand." Another silence. "I didn't want your business." "Dad." He didn't answer. "I wanted to build something with you." I felt tears gathering in my eyes. "I wanted you to trust me." I took a shaky breath. I wanted to matter. On the other end of the line, I heard him begin to sob. And suddenly I realized something. This conversation wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about the business. It was about a father finally understanding what his daughter had spent her entire life trying to tell him. "I failed you," he whispered. The words hit me harder than I expected, because I'd waited my entire life to hear them. And now, they didn't change anything. I sat down slowly. "You chose Tiffany. I know. You chose her over me every single time. I know. You chose her feelings over my work." He cried openly now. "I know." I wiped my eyes. The anger I'd carried for so long suddenly felt heavy, exhausting. "I can't fix that, Dad." "I know." We stayed on the phone for almost an hour. At the end of the conversation, he said something that broke my heart. "I don't know who I am without the business." I thought about the man who had once built an empire with one truck and a dream, the man who had taught me to work hard, the man who had also spent decades hurting me without realizing it. "You're still my father." A long silence. Then he whispered, "Thank you." The business closed 2 weeks later. The bankruptcy auction sold everything. The warehouse, the equipment, the remaining inventory, even the trucks. Ironically, one of the repossessed trucks still had Jason's giant promotional photo on the side. A former employee sent me a picture. I stared at it for a long time. The image of his smiling face being hauled away on a tow truck somehow captured the entire story. Everything built on appearances eventually collapses. Dad had to sell his house. He moved into a small apartment to make ends meet. He started driving for a rideshare company. The man who had once run a multi-million-dollar company was now driving strangers around Phoenix. Tiffany got a job doing administrative work for a construction company in Nevada. No management role, no authority, just a desk and a schedule. Apparently, she did well there. When no one expected her to lead, she actually worked hard. As for Jason, he disappeared. Within 6 months, he was already engaged to someone new, a wealthy technology executive from California. I wasn't surprised. People like Jason don't love people. They love opportunities. His social media changed immediately. Gone were the construction photos. Gone were the family business speeches. Now it was luxury vacations, wine tastings, and captions about living authentically. I looked at one of the pictures and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, nothing at all. About 18 months after the business closed, Dad called again. We hadn't spoken in several months. "Hi, sweetheart." His voice sounded stronger. "Hi? I've been thinking." I smiled a little. That usually meant something important. "You were right." I stayed quiet. About Tiffany. About Jason. About everything. I looked down at my coffee. I let my feelings cloud my judgment. I didn't answer. I spent so much time trying to protect Tiffany that I forgot to appreciate you. I closed my eyes. "I'm proud of you, Emily." The words hit me like a wave. 34 years. I had waited 34 years to hear those words. And now I finally did. I should have been happy. Instead, I just felt peaceful. "Thank you," I said softly. We talked for another 20 minutes. He asked about my company. I told him we were expanding into California and Texas. We had grown faster than I ever imagined. I had hired new consultants. We were opening another office. At the end of the call, he asked quietly, "Do you think we could ever rebuild our relationship?" I thought about it. About everything. The favoritism, the betrayal, the pain. Then I answered honestly, "I don't know. I understand. But I'm not angry anymore." Silence. Anger was just me expecting something different from you. I took a breath. "Now I know who you are." I heard him quietly crying again. "Can we talk again sometime?" "Yes. Thank you." We hung up. A few weeks later, Tiffany sent me a message. It simply said, "I'm sorry for everything." I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, "I hope you're doing okay." That was enough. Some wounds don't heal. They simply stop bleeding. Last Saturday, I was having lunch at a restaurant in Phoenix when I saw Jason. He was with his new wife and her children. He looked happy. He saw me. For a second, I expected him to come over. Instead, he looked away. I smiled to myself. Then, I returned to my lunch. Because he no longer mattered. That evening, I reviewed next year's business plan. We were expanding again, hiring new employees, creating profit-sharing programs, offering equity to long-term staff. One of my partners asked why I was so determined to share ownership. I smiled. Because I know what it feels like to build something important and have someone pretend you were never part of it. I will never let another person feel invisible, not if I can help it. As for my father, we still talk sometimes. Carefully, slowly. Maybe we'll rebuild something. Maybe we won't. But if we do, it will be because he finally sees me. Not as the daughter who fixes problems. Not as the backup plan. Not as the child who can always be counted on. But simply, as his daughter.